a king in the Indian subcontinent was walking along the river, and a wali of Allah Azza wa Jal, a friend of Allah Azza wa Jal, was sat by the riverside. So the king, with his entourage, was walking past, and he said, "Where do you live? Why are you here?" He said, "Well, I live by the riverside." He said, "Have you got a house?" He said, "No, this is where I spend my time." He said, "Well, what about the weather? What happens when things, it's raining, it's snowing, it's cold, it's windy?" He said, "None of it bothers me." He said, "Have you got a family?" He says, "No, I don't have anything." He says, "Oh, right." He says, "But doesn't this weather and all these difficulties bother you?" He says, "No, they don't. And in any event, all this happens because of my will. Because I will, the sun shines. Because I will, the wind blows. Because I will, the rain rains." So suddenly this king was intrigued. He said, "What are you talking about? All this happens with the command of Allah Azza wa Jal. Doesn't happen with your will." And this friend of Allah Azza wa Jal said, "Okay, oh dear king, you haven't understood what I am saying. Since I struck a friendship with Allah Azza wa Jal, I haven't kept a will of my own. Whatever the will of my creator is my will. If Allah Azza wa Jal wants it to rain, my will is that it rains, and I'm at peace with that. If Allah Azza wa Jal wants the winds to blow, I want the winds to blow because that is the command of my Lord, and I'm happy with that. If the sun comes out, that is the command of Allah, but it is my will as well, because I have lost my will in the will of my Creator." Now in there is a very, very precious Madani pearl. And that is that a lot of time when we are upset, when we are depressed, when we are anxious, something has happened that we don't agree with. And that has made us depressed. Why? Because there is the decree of Allah Azza wa Jal, and there is my heart's desire. And the decree of Allah Azza wa Jal is absolute. My heart's desires are fake, are weak, are not important. But I stick to these rather than accepting the decree of Allah Azza wa Jal. And I say, what if this had happened? What if that had happened? What if that had happened? Rather than saying, this was the will of my Lord. This was the decree of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this happened because Allah Azza wa Jal commanded it. And that conflict in our mind creates a lot of our anxiety, a lot of our depression, and a lot of our difficulties. When I want something to happen, and it doesn't happen according to my will, my faith becomes stronger because I know that there is a will greater than mine, and that is the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is something that we need to develop. If you've done everything you could possibly have done, or even if you haven't, but something has happened, once it has happened, yes, learn lessons from it, but at the same time, accept it as the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, when you start to do this, you start to develop a mindset to try and deal with these thoughts and the negativity of them. Like when the body gets a disease, the immune system fights it. And sometimes when the immune system can't, we go to the doctor and the doctor gives us antibiotics or some other medication to support the immune system to try and heal you and make you better. Well, in exactly the same way, the mind also needs medication. The first step, there is no inbuilt immune system in the mind because you have to activate that through Islamic thinking. And this is the key word, Islamic thinking. You have to think in every situation the way that Allah Azza wa Jal wants you to. And once you start to analyze things in that way, then Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, you will start to dissect your anxiety, your depression, and your mental state. And once you do that, you start to see things much clearer. It's like the person with the red tinted glasses where everything was red. But if he suddenly took the glasses off and then started to look, he would see the blue sky, he would see the green grass, he would see the beautiful roses and the tulips and the daffodils. But if he keeps the glasses on, it won't work. This disease of depression shows us darkness. But the reality is that the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal are all around us. The problem is we don't appreciate them.